Sure. We're ready if you're ready, Paul.
Yes, we're ready. Okay. Welcome, everyone. It is Tuesday, April 9th, 2024. It is 6:32. It's the Warren Township High School Regular Board of Education meeting. Ms. Love, if we could get a roll call, please.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Carlson.
Here.
Mr. DeMonte.
Here.
Mrs. Martinez.
Here.
Mrs. Pope.
Here.
Mr. Schultz.
Here.
Mrs. Squires.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Awesome. As we start every meeting, if we could stand up and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First up is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to tonight's agenda? If not, I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte.
Yes.
Mrs. Pope.
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez.
Yes.
Mrs. Squires.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Thanks. Next up is our time for public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, they are more than welcome. You're allowed up to 3 minutes to address the board, keeping in mind it's not a dialogue. I thought John was going to address the board.
I have a few things I'd like to say. It's good day. Like his chair. I want new chairs.
Agreed.
We're working on that.
Yeah. Moving forward, next up is the consent agenda. Hold on. I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented, which includes personnel recommendations per Exhibit A, numbers 96 through 98, as posted. There is no Exhibit B, athletics and activities, for this meeting. The payment of the bills dated April 9, 2024, in the amount of $957,066.19, and regular meeting minutes and executive session minutes of March 19, 2024.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Carlson. Mr. DeMonte.
Yes.
Mrs. Pope.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez.
Yes.
Mrs. Squires.
Yes.
Mr. Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, we just have one action item for tonight, and that's to approve the 24-25 school board meeting schedule. It's more of a formality than anything else. Any last-second questions? If not, I move to approve the 2024 through 2025 school board meeting schedule as presented.
Second.
Roll call.
Yes.
Mr. Carlson.
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte.
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mrs. Pope.
Yes.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Now we'll move into the committee of a whole. I move for the Warren Township High School Board of Education to move to the committee of the whole for the purpose of this section of the meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Pope. Mrs. Martinez.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. DeMonte.
Yes.
Mr. Carlson.
Yes.
Mrs. Pope. Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
7 yes, motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. First committee that we have is the Stakeholder Committee.
I want to start our stakeholder discussion by giving a shout out to all our staff and students. They are some of the most important stakeholders. I wrote the following that I'd like us to discuss briefly. As we approach the final stretch of the school year, we believe it is important to prioritize and support our staff and students. These last few weeks can be tough for students who may struggle with academic performance and the potential loss of social and emotional support. It is equally important for our students to receive the support they need during this time. Vigilance and reporting of any student's wellness or safety concerns to the school staff is essential. By working together, we can ensure that our students receive the necessary support to successfully navigate these final weeks of school. So that's our opening statement.
Thank you.
I'm going to continue with, I know that Danny put together a second draft of the communication guide and chain of command document. The idea came out of our board retreat that we had a couple weeks ago. Do you want to go through that?
I just have like an example, so I don't have the whole thing up, but I can go through the whole thing if people would want to.
So my only question is, or comment, I should say, is that because I wasn't here at the last meeting, so I don't know, obviously may not understand what all was discussed, but like, just for instance, the athletic one is so long, because some of these things are time sensitive, right? That would take 3 weeks
That's fair.
to go through every person. I'm not saying you shouldn't do something, right? Not just jump right to the superintendent, you don't want that. But I'm just trying, some of them, and there were several of them that were that long.
Yeah,
That had a
that's true.
chain that went. It just seems to me that's almost too much. People will almost give up before they can get through that chain of people.
Sure.
And especially in athletics, it's gonna be timely, or they're
Sure.
gonna want, a resolution. Not that they need it, not that they're gonna win or get anything, but they need a final resolution.
But that's not to say that the coach can't give a final resolution, right? Like, if there was a
Understood.
problem.
Yeah.
It may.
Well, you would always
be
start with number
solved.
one. Number one is not the
Yeah.
problem. It might be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever, when you get.
I think what you're
down
gonna
to
get
it.
here is people going from 1 to 5 if they don't like what they hear. Keep going.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's up to them, I guess. At some point, maybe that's just their problem. They already have the answer, they just don't like it, but.
Either that, they might go from one to another step down the road if,
Skip somebody.
I contacted the coach or the assistant coach in this example, and I haven't heard back. How much longer do I wait before I go to the next step? I think that would be a lot of people's concerns, too. It's time sensitive. How long do I wait till I,
It is probably half of them that are 5 or 6 even steps. There's a couple that are 6.
I guess I'm not looking at this as we have to get to step 5, like I said, to solve a problem. Like, I actually, something came up this week. A personal friend had notified me about something, and she was actually working right along the steps. And her resolution came at step 2, and they were all, it went through 1, then it went through 2, and 1 and 2 discussed, and it was resolved. And so, yeah, there might, and it was time sensitive, frankly. So I guess I'm not denying what you're saying. I understand what you're saying, but I think like, I don't see a workaround, like calling Danny for a problem because it's time sensitive. We're still gonna need people to have the involvement at step 1 to 2, 3. So I don't know how to avoid it, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
Whatever. Don't, you
I'm
don't have
not,
to
I'm
change
not
it.
arguing
I'm
with you,
just,
John. I understand what you're saying.
I don't disagree with what you're saying either. I just
Yeah.
wonder, how, we can start with it's fine. Doesn't,
No, I think we should keep talking through this because the point of this was to make sure that the board has confidence that everyone's responding to community concerns in the same way. And that does seem like a scenario where we probably just need to clarify among all of us, how are we going to respond when someone says, but this is 6 steps long. I have a time sensitive incident. So one thing that I would throw out is, I'm just talking out of pocket right now, myself or board member could respond by saying, hey, have you talked to the coach? In this example, hey, have you talked to the coach? Yep, I've already talked to the coach. Okay, like the next person up the line would be the athletic director. And if they say like, yeah, I understand there's like 5 or 6 people of that, but this is time sensitive. You could agree that if somebody brings up a time sensitive manner, it would be fairly normal actually for someone to email the athletic director and then copy all of the people that are up on the steps. That does happen regularly, and so you could give that to them as an option. Sometimes people will do that. That won't be out of the norm if they do something. I'm just throwing out an idea that you could
Yeah.
discuss.
but
Bud and I might have to put that as our screensaver. Oh, yeah.
We'll just put our
Boy, I'm glad you
Facebook,
said
our Facebook
Right.
header.
Yeah, it could be the cover, the
There you
Facebook
go.
cover.
And an auto reply for instant message. I
Right,
like
right,
that one too. Okay, good. We're good.
So as we're talking about these steps, if we feel that these are the steps that we're gonna go with right now, would you all agree that it would be a good idea to put it on the Board of Education web page?
just someplace
Yeah,
more visible.
Yes, thank
Oh,
you.
yeah. It was just a suggestion, like, we could have it on the web page and then have something too on in the Board of Education page, just to hit both things so people realize, or community realizes that this is, even though it should be an automatic, that it's a board-approved chart, but that might just give a little bit more reinforcement.
It's gotta be visible. If we just put it just on the board
Yeah.
Yeah,
site,
right.
nobody will find it.
Yeah.
Could we juice it up a little bit? Say if I have a problem with athletics, here's my string, and if I have a problem with grades, here's my string, and if I have a problem with whatever?
I was just thinking, like, on the athletics page, like, do we put the athletics part of it, or?
Like the
you
steps.
know, Yeah. And I know that's a lot of work, so I hesitated even saying it, but
And
Carlson
right
started
off-
me, so.
Right off the bat on each page, and forgive
Yeah.
me, if you have a question, this is what you do, boom, 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 depending on what page, seemed to me.
You can just put a link on the homepage too, on one of the drop-downs.
Yeah.
Communication guide, who do I contact for what?
For what?
Here it is.
For concerns.
Yeah.
I think you should call it a communication guide,
Yeah,
100%,
as a parent, that would be super helpful.
yeah.
And I understand what all of you were saying about the multiple steps, but I think the idea is the people who are closest to the problem are going to be the quickest to resolve it. And so if I talk to the coach and then skip to the superintendent's just going to be contacting the athletic director and I'm be waiting.
What's going on?
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yeah,
so I think as we're helping people think about how to get a resolution for their problem, I would lean towards, like, not just that this is efficient for the system, but it's efficient for the families too, I think.
Okay, so we can put it on, sounds like a couple spots on the website. We'll talk about that internally.
Yeah, I would even suggest that we do add the word, and so like if we're gonna keep it to like communication guide, but we throw in somewhere communication/concern guide. So they just don't think that, like that they're looking for another spot on how to get to a topic that is an actual complaint or concern.
Sure.
questions, concerns, and communication.
Yeah, questions, concerns, communications.
Andy can help me zhuzh it up a little bit
Yeah,
too. It's kind
she's
of
good
dry
at that.
right now. So real quick, communication concern, what was the third
Questions.
question? Okay.
See, who should I call today?
All right, moving on. So Danny has been talking to Steve and I a little bit about being engaged more as a board. This topic also came up in our board retreat. I know that Steve and I are in the foundation, which is a good way for us to be involved in the community as board members. Danny also put together a few ideas on how we could get better at engaging with our community. I think these are just ideas to get us started in a conversation.
If I could kick in real
Yes,
quick, I want to give a
yes.
little report here. Danny and I have met with Congressman Schneider already. We met with State Representative Mason already. Tomorrow, we're going to meet with the chair of the United Way, Lake County United Way, to talk about 211 and ways that they can help our kids use that. We had an unofficial meeting with the recently departed county administrator who knows everybody, as well as the board president, Board of Health president, and the executive director of the Board of Health, and I think they were very good at steering Danny in some areas in terms of fundraising and foundations, that sort of thing. I think that's my pocket ringing, but whatever. But Mark Pfister knows everybody, and he knows how to raise money, and he gave Danny some good connections for grants and fundraising. And we're also going to meet with Lake County Partners. Those of you not familiar with that, that's everybody in Lake County that, from Abbott on down. And we're talking in terms of internships and slots and maybe some kind of funding for some programs that we're looking at. And Danny, if I missed anything, let me know.
Yeah, I think that's recent. Those are recently some of the things people we've connected with. I appreciate that, Steve. Steve definitely, I think, sees part of his, what he can add is making sure that I get to know people in the community that I wouldn't otherwise get to know. So I appreciate that.
He has the resources and the time.
Yeah. So I
In a
know.
very positive way, Steve.
I know that this is something that we talked about in the board retreat, and when Miss Martinez, Laura Martinez sent the follow-up, this was one of the things that was on the next steps list, was finding ways to, come up with some ideas. So I just threw out 3.
We also met with CLC president, I forgot that one.
Yes, we did do that, yep.
Or instead of-
I'm just
Proper.
There you go.
I'm just throwing out 3. One would be to try to make sure that board members have specific roles or connections or are involved with community groups or boards. Some of you already are, but if you wanted help with that, Gene and I could help you do that. Steve could probably help do that. And I think Natalia and Steve's involvement in the foundation is an example of that. I think the idea came up at the retreat of using parents as some type of research committee. I think Tony brought up that idea as a possibility, so I threw that up there to put that in front of us again. And then the third example I threw up was we could just expand the use of parent advisory councils. We have a bilingual parent advisory council. They came and just introduced themselves to the board. Go ahead.
Which I still have to meet with.
That's okay. They know.
Okay,
Yeah, you're on.
okay.
You're on the list.
So before I forget, because it's been busy.
We can reconnect on that.
Yes, let's reconnect on that
Yeah.
in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
Set a date.
And that parent advisory council is a good way for, if the board wanted to, they could formally engage with them once or twice a school year. We could expand that and maybe come up with a second group. It's normal for a school district because there's some state requirements around it to have a bilingual parent advisory committee. But we could try doing that with another targeted group of parents, and then come up with a way for our school board to interact a couple times with those parent advisory committees. So those are just some ideas. I'll throw it back to you all to talk about, if you want to talk about any of those ideas or other ideas of how to engage with the community. Generally, like our principals oftentimes are able to identify some parents that they see all the time, have already communicated with, and so you try to rally a handful of those people and you just ask them, hey, would you like to be on a group of ours that meets 4 or 5 times during the year?
Well, and when I reviewed this, I really maybe because I'm doing like example 1, personally feel comfortable with that, but like example 3, I think in terms of parent advisory, I was kind of like, well, what would be nice to know? And in light of our special ed audit, I was kind of thinking along the lines of, would it be nice to have an advisory committee, going along the way with direct communication and being able to kind of bounce things and discuss things. I defer to you guys, but I was kind of thinking about that, since that's, a long project. And I use the word special ed, but I would call it gen ed discussion. But I don't know if that would be something that we would want to think about, but I would love to kind of hear their feedback as we go along the process too, so.
That would be one to start. And you won't have any trouble getting the special ed parents in here.
Not at all.
They'll be here in a heartbeat.
What would it take in terms of staff time to do? So example 1 is just guiding us into doing something that somebody else has already got going.
Correct.
But 2 and 3 would require staff time here
Correct.
to coordinate and manage.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts about that?
I think generally probably for a single committee meeting, if it's a parent advisory committee or council, for every hour that they meet, there's probably, I would say, 2 hours of prep time. So if there's a meeting, the administrators probably need 2 hours of prep time for that meeting. So if they meet 4 or 5 times a year, maybe between, around 10 hours of work time probably. The real work would probably, there's some time to prep for that meeting. The work really probably comes more after we engage with them and the ideas come from that meeting. And so new ideas would come from that meeting, either when we're interacting with them as administrators or if you as a board are interacting with those councils in some way. if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I like the idea of forming a parent advisory council or a research group to help us gather information about something we're trying to know more about.
I'm assuming you,
But
oh, go ahead.
I just want to be mindful of that there are time costs, if any.
I want to have at least one board member ad hoc on each committee to observe or show up once in a while or monitor or whatever.
Yeah, I think you could approach it one of two ways. You could say we would like a board member to formally be on this group, or you could say we want this group to interact with each other a handful of times a year, and then we just want to come, and maybe one or two of the meetings are.
Be ex officio, you just show up, but you don't have a vote.
Yeah, there's a few different ways you could approach that. Yeah.
I think if the committees, if you're talking about 2 and 3, they would theoretically be focused towards things we're trying to accomplish anyway, right? I mean, that's why you would do them. You would focus them on things we need to improve or change or whatever you want to call it. So that would be, a valuable use, hopefully, of people's time. And those would be the hardest ones to do for sure, because you're greenfielding, you're starting from nothing, so. But worthwhile endeavors.
I mean, to Natalia's opening statement, I mean, some of our most significant stakeholders are the parents and students. And so that would be a nice way for the board to connect with the community, their community members as well. I'm not dismissing any of the other stuff. I'm just saying, like, I think during the strategic planning, that was a real big win-win, and it really focused our efforts on stuff that people were interested in, but also incorporated them in the process so that they felt included. And I think especially, like, when I think about the special ed or the gen ed stuff, like, it's gonna be a huge overhaul, so that, I don't wanna do that without, like, major stakeholders involved, things like that. So I don't know. I think that's a really important one for us as board members to focus on. I think the community involvement, formal community involvement, I think a lot of us are involved in the community in any way, but I think we could probably do more of that. I think the strategic planning showed us that people wanted to be involved, wanted to be heard, wanted to be included, and I don't know, I just really gravitated towards the thought of that.
I guess my question then is, if everybody likes 2 and 3, how do we pick the subjects because they'd have to be focused on something, whether it's gen ed which I think that should be one, because I assume we're still thinking about implementing some of the changes that the study
Definitely.
gave to us. So then bringing a group together with board members and parents that discuss those changes would certainly seem to be a wise use of energy. So that'd be one.
Maybe our principals or, our staff have another idea of stuff that they would like to see us involved in, for instance, as opposed to us wanting to be involved in something.
I'm thinking, with example number 3, I don't think with one of the groups they'd necessarily have to have an agenda. I think once we get the parents together and start talking, they'll let us know what some agenda items are, and maybe we spin off another group. I mean, let's get the parents to get together and see what's important to them. My concern would be that we think this is important and that's important, then we get parents together and they're like, well, no, those are good, but this is more important. So let's let the parents develop it.
To your point, so in long-term care, for instance, we do resident council meetings every month. And we go through, just general subjects from care to whatever the case is. But it might be a nice touch point for parents to come and provide feedback on relative topics to the school that aren't necessarily agenda specific, but I'm not looking for a complaint for them. I mean, they could come here, they don't, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
If they had a more formalized way that the parents could be heard, maybe they would enjoy that, so.
Haven't we already had some kind of parent advisory? Was there not already a parent advisory meeting or something?
So we have, like, once a year we have a parent, it's like once a year we go through the handbook changes, and we have once annually You could call it a parent handbook committee. I don't know, I forget exactly what that's called, but I think it's the parent handbook committee.
Okay.
It just meets once a year. It's really targeted towards handbook
The
changes.
handbook is the topic, okay.
Policy.
Yeah, it's just policy and handbook.
You know, it's one
Some of
thing-
our committees have parents involved.
Correct.
It's one thing to have a group of, a formal committee, it's another thing to have an informal group of people sitting around a table discussing their problems and having a free-form discussion, and do not underestimate the power of a presence of a board member. It's one thing for them to be talking among themselves. If they think somebody's actually there, that puts it on a whole new level.
Yeah, I do think that one thing that we've seen that's been really great with the bilingual parent group that Sandy put together is that it's different than coming to a board meeting, and so they're able to build some level of small community within just the group of 10 of them, and the conversations are different because of that. And
Be an ongoing problem.
yeah.
I think there doesn't have to be an agenda, right? But you have to bring, you don't have to, but it would be easier to bring people in if they had a common denominator of some description, whatever it would be. So the special ed parents come in, you just talk, or athletics, or
Athletic committee.
whatever,
Yeah.
not, just say, hey, we're just here, let's have a forum about,
Focus.
Any problems lately?
yeah.
Are you talking about having a general forum?
No, they need to be
Yeah,
specific.
specific, and then
Otherwise-
whoever's
yeah.
interested, they
And then
attend.
that would theoretically would form some sort of a path. Sometimes it's maybe a path you don't necessarily want, but,
I agree, there should definitely be a topic that it's organized around,
yeah.
yeah.
Otherwise, people just won't come, right? I mean, they just.
Yeah.
I think you need structure and a topic, but I'm gonna go back to what I said before. It's gotta be broad. I don't wanna get it too
Yeah.
laser focused that we're telling them what the topics have to be.
Right.
So it seems like there's some rallying around something that exists between 2 and 3. So is it okay if we come back with some possible common denominators? And then I think it would be good for us to just put this on our action plans for next year. And then you as a board can own the specific action item. We'll be helping to implement that. But we're doing that at the same time that we're doing other actions and strategies for next year. Thank you. That's super helpful. We'll come back
Number
with
one,
some.
too, just maybe if we knew, if we had and I don't know what all committees people are involved in, or what you're doing or whatever, but if board members are involved in one, then maybe we could come up with a list of other groups, whether it's, the Exchange Club or this club or whichever one of them, that does not have a board member, then other board members could consider, joining one of the ones that doesn't have one. We don't need everybody on the same one, that's for sure.
Do that. So I do think that's Gene and I can help with that, and then facilitate some of those connections. And if you'd like to be involved with that, I do find that as I get involved with groups, even if I'm just a person, they know that I'm from the school district, and so they're asking me questions, and I'm able to be a liaison in that way. So we can come up with that list, even if it's not a formal strategy. We can come up with
Right.
that list
Yeah,
and
yeah.
give it to everybody.
Yep.
Cool.
All right, so on a final note for myself, before we move on to board agreements, less fun stuff, I do believe.
What agreements are super fun.
Beth and I slay for days.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Susan, excuse me,
That's
Susan.
all right. Right. He's all right.
Danny, I believe the Teacher Appreciation Week is coming up.
Is this
Want to
true?
make sure that we, as a board, somehow are able to participate and support our staff during that week.
Yeah, Gene and I usually take a morning and do something for that, so we'll keep the board in the loop, and then if anybody wants to help with any of that, we can involve you formally for that.
Great.
Otherwise, usually we do something and we can make sure it says from the district office and the Board of Education. That sounds good. I appreciate that nudge.
All right, well, I think that Susan has been working on a draft.
John, too.
You didn't, John? Do you want to take over now?
I heard I was.
Yeah, so one of the things that came out of our board training was to update our board agreements and also look at them. So, so we did that using most of this comes from the template that we got from Laura Martinez. We adapted a few things. So, thoughts? Anyone? Anything? It is pretty comprehensive.
One thing that struck me was we're supposed to talk to the president before the meeting, and the next line it says, but you don't have to. I just found that interesting.
Where's that?
Supposed to talk to the president before the meeting about any questions. It's not on here, but it's on the
Oh.
sheet. But the next sentence says, but you may bring up questions at the
Oh,
meeting.
right.
And I just,
Yes.
one or the other, just leave them both out, or whatever.
One of the bullet points too that I actually emailed Danny on was, which is very minor, it talked about having a deadline on when we would submit our questions or concerns in regards to the, whatever the board packet had.
Good.
So instead of keeping it generalized to like, I think that we need to put a date and a time. So let's say we decide
Like
Monday.
Mondays at 3 o'clock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, like Friday, 3 o'clock, but you know, most of the time we don't get those emails from you until later on Friday, so maybe like, just a suggestion, say like Monday, 10 a.m., then that way that still gives staff enough time to come back if we have any questions that we need clarified before Tuesday's meeting. And then we're not asking on Tuesday.
Yes, okay, so to put the time and day in the board agreements, yeah.
Right, so,
Okay.
sorry, long story short,
I
my
got you.
suggestion is just putting an actual time and date.
I think that's perfectly
as a
fine.
cutoff.
Under 4C, board members will not email other board members. I can understand that and FOIA and all that, but I mean, is FOIA the concern there, or what? 4C?
You shouldn't email all 7 other board members
No,
at
no,
any
but
time.
it doesn't say all other board members, it says other board members. I understand Open Meetings Act.
So the question is there concern if you emailed me with
Yeah.
an opinion or asking my opinion on something,
Right.
if that's
Is
necessarily?
that a concern, or is
concern, yeah.
it not?
Are you saying it should be 2 or more defined or
No,
something
no, no,
like
no.
that?
Open Meetings Act notwithstanding, if I want to know your opinion on something, am I free to email you and ask you, or is that precluded here? And if
Oh.
so, why?
I think what this is addressing is to keep in mind as you write your email.
It's FOIAble.
It can be, yeah,
But other than that, this is not a prohibition, it's just like
it's
beware
not a
of what you-
prohibition, it's just
Thank you.
advise.
Okay,
Don't say something you don't want in the newspaper.
Yeah.
learned that years ago.
Yeah. So one of the things that I took out, which seemed important, but it was so vague, and I couldn't think of how to make it not so vague, was no surprises, which is an important guideline to agree on, you know, like if there's I feel like it's addressed in the ask your questions before the meeting, and then you can ask them also during the meeting. But,
We used to use the term ambush.
yeah, not sure we want to write that in our formal board agreements. Does anybody have a feeling about that? Like it's important that we include something like that
I
in
think
our
that's
written?
how you treat people, period, on a board.
I think it's okay if we specify that. It's got a nice, open, polite tone to it, like no surprises.
Or how about
Yeah.
provide the respect or the courtesy of, you know, a prior discussion or a prior
Rephrase that, Bob?
communication. Something to the effect of, you know, exercise courtesy when, you know, when you have a topic that you would wish to discuss.
Or like meeting etiquette.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, or, you know, I just started talking out loud, sorry.
Number 1 is kind of that thing, so board members will strive to work together and assume positive intentions on the part of other board members. I mean,
That says a lot right there.
that's kind of the same thing as no surprises, but no surprises is a little more direct at, you know, don't ambush people at a
Yeah.
meeting when you know the answer is going to be difficult. That's, you know, but sometimes we have to have difficult conversations at the meeting, so, I don't know. I like number 1.
I mean, you could put at the end, after, other board members, we can just, in one simple statement, just say, be respectful. That also ties into what we're teaching our kids to be on a daily basis.
Where are you looking?
Right, just, number 1, just after the initial,
Oh, like at the end of 1A?
yeah,
Yes.
the end of 1A.
So one other thing that Paul brought up that I thought was a fair point, I thought it myself, was number 4. Where was it? What line?
Hold on,
was it?
is what I
9?
did going against 4C that I
Yes.
emailed you my opinion on
It's
something?
9B. Only issues, never people, will be attacked during meetings. The word attack is a little
Yeah, I thought that was a little strong.
abrasive. So the same thing had crossed my mind, but I couldn't think of a word to replace it.
Discussed. Only issues
Discussed.
will be
Oh,
people.
that's an interesting new angle.
Topics, not people, will be discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Debated.
Meetings will be concerned with issues, not people.
There you go.
Rephrase
That's
it.
good.
Yeah, make sure discussions don't become personal.
Right.
Okay. I think I can make. I'd also, okay, related to that, I would love it if we had some kind of annual schedule, either reviewing board agreements or having a formal board training like we did this year, or,
Absolutely, I think the board agreement should be looked at, reviewed a couple times a year. It should be a living document, because
I mean, certainly no less than every 2 years when you get a new board. So, but you can do it in April every year, which would be coincide with right after the election, or May, for the, because you kind of be doing it for the following year.
I mean, I think if we wanted to do a formal board training like we did this year, then that would naturally be a time to look at the board agreements. If that's not something we want to do, then,
Oh, that's fine, yeah, that works too. But I think, yeah, you probably shouldn't do a board training right after you have the election, like in May. You should probably do it like we did this year, February, or,
in the winter.
yeah, in the winter sometime.
Glad I had several board meetings to have a rough idea what the heck was going on before I had training, because I didn't know what questions to ask. I mean, it helps.
that's where a board mentor would help out in the interim.
Right,
Yeah.
so that's the final piece, was that we have a policy encouraging mentors for new school board members.
That would be Thisbe.
We have our own
Oh, we have our
policy about it.
You'd have another board member who would be your board member mentor.
Yeah. So
Right.
it would be like when I had joined the board, if one of you had been attached to me as a mentor. So we have something here that defines what that means. I think it would be great if we did it.
I think it's a great idea. I had one comment that I would add to it, and word it however you want, but if you're the mentor to someone, make sure after every meeting, committee meeting, board meeting, to sit with them afterwards and answer questions.
Yeah.
Because when you're new to the board and you're sitting here, it can be really confusing, like, what do they mean by that? What's the background for that? Why do we do it this way?
Some people are
right-
afraid to ask questions.
Yeah, but right then, right after that meeting is the best time to answer those questions.
So I do have one really quick comment. In regards to like picking back on board agreements, I also think it's important that we at least once a year together, even if it's individually, but that we do take the time to go through our board policies and get familiarized with what our staff and faculty are working with. Because a lot of times within the working place, as an employee, you can refer back to like, oh, well, what does the board policy say, right? We should familiarize ourselves with the same as they do. So, so one thing are board agreements, but then there's a whole separate piece, which are the board policies. And that also is pretty important to make sure that you're familiar with. Is there any chance that I know that we can find it online, but,
Don't ask them to print them.
No, not to print it, but like maybe just insert it in one of our board packets, the next time, just so we have as a reference to look back to.
Yep, Gina and I can work on that.
Tab right here, right? I mean, those are the ones we're talking about, these policies? The board policies?
Yeah, I haven't gone on the website.
Okay, yeah, it's right on the board docs tab.
I have seen some school boards sometimes and maybe this is how I interpreted what Natalia was saying, on a regular basis, they're like, hey, check these 5 policies out, and just to get boards in some type of cycle of some type of review cycle.
All right, is there anything else we need to do about that if we,
Sure.
yeah. Somebody mentor me about what we do now.
Or now?
No, no,
Okay. Too late for
too
that.
late.
I think the next steps for your agreements are to ask us to put them somewhere so that they're memorialized, not just in your email strands. And then we make sure with our board president that we do some type of review next year / training and make assignments for board mentors. We can do that.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
doing
much
that.
for working on these. There's nothing else. Next up, we go on to the student discussion.
For the student discussion, we have 2 areas. One is the handbook changes, giving us an opportunity, because I believe it was stated at some point that we wanted a chance to look and see what the changes are in the handbook. So today would be that opportunity to see what changes are going to be made in there. And then the other, and that's mostly going to be driven by Danny and whoever else needs to chime in. And then the other is just our metrics to make sure that we're progressing with our strategic plan. So talking about what metrics make sense, the ones that they proposed, maybe even some that don't make sense. So I guess if we could start with the handbook changes.
Yeah, so we put a red line version of the handbook changes in there and wanted to make sure you guys got that early this year. So if there were any other questions or concerns or topics that we needed to talk through, that we could start that conversation today. I would say there aren't really big changes in the handbook that we've at this point identified. Some, like the most significant changes are we've got an updated bell schedule. We've got some AI stuff in there, and the regional office just came in and did an audit and helped us identify some things that we need to clean up with our handbook. So we don't have any big topical, big balloons that we're trying to pop with the handbook. But if there are important topics to people, this would be a good time to talk about those. If not, at least this is a nudge for people to start thinking about that.
I'm just curious, what'd you do with AI, and what does counterfeit money have to do with anything?
So with artificial intelligence, we just made sure that we had a statement in there that identified how we interpret it, what's acceptable use, how students can and cannot use it, clarified that it does, in some situations, could be considered plagiarism.
Paragraph in there, chapter 12, I believe, that kind of says when you can or can't use it. And there are some portions in there where I think it says like taking notes, or kids with IEPs can use it. Like there are some positive opportunities to use it, but our policies help guide, if needed, discipline. So if we have egregious use of AI, I believe there would be the ability then by the administration to, first teach when it shouldn't be used, but let's say the 10th time there's a kid submitting work as their own and it's AI created, there might need to be a consequence, and that language allows for that.
Quick, if I could, who's gambling? Gambling what? You're talking addiction or activity?
Activity, gambling activity.
Okay.
Just trying to clarify there. I think the prior policy or the prior description of gambling was just with money, but kids are gambling with things that represent money. So we're trying to make sure that that doesn't happen either.
When you say represent money, give me an example.
Like poker chips
Oh.
wouldn't actually
Okay.
be $1.
The what I need schedule, it doesn't have times connected to it yet. Is that the plan is that early release
Correct. The what I need schedule, it might not have times in it. We might still be working on that. But generally, the idea for what I need schedule is an open intervention period for students where they can, they have some flexibility in deciding who they need to go to for help. And so instead of, well, my math teacher has a prep period, open period during fifth period. That happens to be when I have lunch, so I can go get some help from my math teacher. It's we've seen some schools that are doing kind of a couple times during the year, common office hours for all staff during the day. We researched some schools, high schools that are trying this in Northern Illinois, and we want to try that a couple times next year and see if that might be a long-term tool for some of our student support. But if we don't have times in there yet, it's just because we're trying to figure out the times
Okay.
still.
But that'll be an occasional thing next year to
Correct.
see how it works. Okay.
Real quick, what Faith's Law is?
Faith's Law requires us to do background checks on prospective employees. It's a kind of an expanded expectation that we contact all prior employees, including if I worked like for Burger King, you'd have to reach out to Burger King to see if there were any, any predatory sexual red flags that have come up in my prior work history.
Thank you.
I have to say, the counterfeit money did throw me. Was that a legal requirement? Do you know? I personally have never seen it, but maybe I should know about it.
I thought somebody maybe come to the cafeteria.
Or there's something going on at Warren that we're all not aware of.
Let me pull this up.
This is why food service charges so much for their.
We're afraid our students are money laundering in the back room. So.
We did just invest in our graphic
credits for
arts
that class,
program.
right?
One of them. I just.
Yeah, I don't
would
know.
assume
Do you know
it's
why
a-
we were at? Can you remind me of why we're adding that one, Dr. Keeley?
Does it really?
Wow.
No kidding. Oh, I was joking.
Maybe they're using school copiers or something.
Easy now, easy.
Oh, you can buy it
You
online?
buy the money online.
Oh, jeez.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Okay. Well, I appreciate getting ahead of it. I wasn't even aware it was a issue.
Under the category of who knew?
I had no idea.
Nope, I don't have anything else for them.
I know it's not like being approved right this second, but Danny did want to make sure that we all had a voice if there was anything we wanted to
I appreciate that.
head off in this or discuss further. All right, so now for metrics, which is probably the beefier discussion and the more important discussion, because it's what helps keep us accountable, you guys accountable, keep us moving forward. So what do you want to do? Go through? Do you
Yeah,
wanna-
I don't really know.
What did you envision for
I
this?
don't really know how to talk through this.
Okay.
So I put on here things that are probably the easiest to grasp. So I've got 14. I would call them student-related metrics. They include some staff numbers or categories, and then some. I'm guessing that pretty quickly, just the operations part of the discussion will come up. So I just put them on the same slide, and then a handful of operations-related metrics, and I think the important thing for the school board to do is to, we measure almost all of these. A lot of them are measured some part of it is measured at the state level. We get reports on this. But I do think that as a school board, you do seem to want to get more updates on at least some of the metrics, which is really good because you want to see progress. And so I think probably you need to start where we need to continue that conversation around prioritizing and picking a handful of these that we can start coming back to more regularly on an aspect of them. For example, graduation rates up there. You might want to focus on graduation rate. That's also very closely related to, that's number one, it's very closely related to number 6. And on-track status happens more often than graduation. But it's also related to 13 failure rates, and you can get failure rates more often than on-track rates. And so as a board, if you're talking about that type of metric, then we can do some work to figure out what would we recommend some of the best numbers for you to look at regularly to monitor what we're spending money on and what we're spending energy and resources on. And you can have discussions around how often you want to see that type of data, and or how often do you want to hear reports on what we're doing to try to impact those numbers. And we're not going to be able to probably give you monthly reports that explain how we're making progress and what we're doing to impact that progress on all 25 of these every month. So it's good to help prioritize these.
How do you come up with these data?
Graduation rates once a year.
So, I've thought a lot about this once it came through the email and stuff, and I was thinking a lot about, like, when we saw that catalog of KPIs and stuff, and a lot of them just looked like, I use the word reliable and not valid to what we look at. Especially like when I look through food service, which I've done, I'm like, who cares about some of this stuff? So I started thinking about our discussions over the last year and a half, 2 years, referendum, like going back. And I was trying to think of what were the important things that we've all discussed, had on our minds, come to like moments with and whatever. And I think, the special ed audit is one where I would definitely need help looking at ways to measure our progress going through that. But the other thing I was looking at was the freshman on track. We've talked a lot about that.
That's important.
Yes. And I was trying to think of ways that like we could kind of rally around ways to improve that. I think data collection would be important, and that's where Danny and I had talked a minute about failure rates and class failure rates. I know that the school has really done a nice job of now putting grades out to parents like midway through the, but if we were seeing failure rates in core classes and seeing like, especially freshmen, sophomore, not especially all, but I'm saying like our freshmen, our sophomore, and looking at where we're seeing kids drop off the cliffs a little bit and try and help identify or put resources to identify what we could do at certain points in time during their progress or lack of progress for that matter. So I was kind of looking at the freshman on track stuff, which it was interesting because in the report for the state report, I was kind of confused because we looked at freshmen on track and then we look at graduation rates. Our graduation rates are higher than the state's, but our freshmen on track is lower than the state. I'm like, what are we doing between? Like, but one doesn't necessarily correlate with the other, and we had a long discussion about that. So it's data is data, right? Like you can slice and dice, but that was one thing I was thinking about. And then the special ed, and then, I don't know, some of the topics kind of come under our discussion in a minute about operations. I'm glad Danny put it up there because, operations are security too, right? And so we've just implemented an entire security force, or most of which is ours now, and how are we measuring how well they're doing? Tony has, led the charge, like we've put all this resource into psychology, social work, interventions. How are we measuring? So those are the topics that, as I was thinking, like, what do we need to measure? We're not gonna just measure to measure, right? We need to hit the things that have been important topics. And with the interventions too, one of the things I was thinking about is, so many times I hear with the kids, well, they can go in at lunch and they can go in at after school. And every time I mention that to a kid, I get words that I'm not gonna use in a board meeting. Like, they're not going, they may be, but that's not their choice, right? So do we need to measure some of the effectiveness or the participation in some of these interventions and see if we're not getting participation, should we be putting money into it or should we be putting money elsewhere? So I'm just gonna leave it, those were my thoughts this weekend about all this, and I feel very strongly that we should be looking at failure rates right now and when and how they come up and who they're coming up for and diving down on that. But beyond that, those were some of the, and I'm not talking about our financial stuff at this point, but
Right.
the security, where we've put our money, and is it working, basically?
It's always important. No, go ahead.
Could you make the argument that the freshmen, our rate for freshmen falling off is higher than the state, but our graduation is higher also, right?
No, our
Are freshmen off track? What
yeah,
was the
off
term?
track, on track is not
Worse
as
than the
good
state.
as the state. I'll
But
put
our
it that way.
graduation rate is higher.
Correct.
So could you make the argument that whatever we're doing is working?
That was a question we were kind of throwing around. Danny, you wanna?
Yeah, we are. I think we do have interventions in place to try to address that stopgap. An example of something that we do a lot of is if a freshman fails a class during their freshman year, we right away start them in some remediation courses. That failed class does still ding them moving forward, and so that impacts our freshman rate, even though maybe by the time they're a sophomore, they've already recovered that credit. We do have,
Just interrupt, so
Yeah.
it's credit versus the actual grade. The credit allows them to graduate, but they've still failed the class and got the credit in a lot of ways, right?
Yes,
So
yep.
that was an interesting point you made.
we do have,
Credits?
just
them out
the
of the
way,
school, yeah.
yeah, we do go by credits for graduation rate. The freshman on track rate is based off of the grade, regardless of the credit.
Decount?
A D would give you a passing grade, yeah.
So would you say some of this is still the effects of coming out of COVID?
I assume that COVID is still having an impact on us for the next 6 or 7 years, yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I think that specifically for failure rates and freshman on track rates, those failure rates are still high regardless of the graduation rate. So we still have 10% of our students failing some of our core classes their freshman year.
And you're still comparing it to a state that went through COVID. So if we're not, we're not matching up to the state, if we're below where we should be for the state, it's still below.
Right now, the things that we have that are best for measuring things like putting extra resources into counselors, social workers, and psychologists are probably things like student perception data. So we do some student perception surveys throughout the year, and some of the questions that we ask students are about their emotional regulation or about how welcome they feel in the school, or do they feel like they're part of the school. Also, I think extracurricular involvement is probably a big part of how students feel at school in terms of the non-academic work that the school district has put resources into, because part of the referendum was let's make sure that we've got clubs and activities because we want our students to be engaged.
And that keeps them out of trouble.
Is there a subset of students who will answer that kind of questionnaire that would affect it?
Say that in a different way for me.
Certain people, a lot of students aren't going to bother with that, and those that do might be a subset that might be different from the whole. Like-
Yeah, we make all the students take the test
They all
twice a
take
year. So some of them might draw Christmas trees on it, but they're all taking it.
I mean, a lot of the things that, generated, at least for me, the activities, all these things we're doing is the achievement gap, right? I mean, we're trying to close that, right?
Yes.
And that's why we have more social workers and more this and more that and more interventionists
More resources.
and everything else. But, I mean, that, again, we get that measurement theoretically once a year. I suppose we could figure out a way to draw that data out of our own system to see how were doing more often if we thought that was of value to understand. Because we're getting in October what we did last year.
Correct.
So that's to me, that's almost a waste of time. I mean, it's a good information because you know, but that's not help, we can't go back and help those people.
Someone used the word autopsy when I discussed this. I thought it was a really good
Well,
way
it's like,
of
it's
saying
like,
it. It's true.
and you're gonna say, okay, we did this wrong, so let's do it different with a whole different set of students who
Right.
may react totally differently.
Right.
So if we don't dig the data out on several, and the achievement gap to me is the one that is the big overarching
Yep.
data point that I think that sets, that we've tried to address.
Look at that, you see,
But freshman on track hits that, and this hits that. and that
failure
hits
rate.
that.
Instead of, let me try to pull this together, because they included a page, albeit just one page, that says Strategic Plan, Warren Township High School 121. Everything that we're discussing here should align with the strategic plan. We've already identified our priority areas, adopted it. That's supposed to be our guide for until 2028. My thinking is all these metrics likely should, if not, they shouldn't be on the list, tie in to, like when I look at the full strategic plan, it would be tied to the work that's the goals that will lead our work and the strategies that represent the 20% of our work with greatest impact. Like, these were from previous documents. I believe they're directly from the strat plan. If that's guiding your work and you're spending the most amount of time, we should know whether it's being effective or not. It's like, yes, Beth brought out every time we add a position, I'm very conscious to say at what point are we measuring to see if that positions should not be in perpetuity. Like, are they working? They're not. If they're not, we change. So I'm wondering if there could be an alignment with some of these. Here's what I'm proposing. I just thought of this now, so I apologize for not sharing it earlier, but tie it back in. If you're really still being guided by the 20%, are they matching the 20%? If not, some of these we get on a regular basis, like attendance and behavior, that's in our board packet.
Right.
Some of this stuff is on the Illinois report card, but the data is a year old. So if it's important data, get us the data before it hits the report card, because you probably are sitting on it. I guess the whole exercise of this was to make sure that we were making gains with our strategic plan and have some accountability, both for our administration and us. And if we're not, and I can just kind of hear where these discussions may go. We get some data that says we're not really making it with academic excellence, moving us forward. You're spending 20% on these strategies. Let's see, strategies that represent 20% of your work. Like, we're not moving. The question then evolves into, why are we not moving? We have some kind of discussion. Is it a position thing? Is it a materials thing? Because that's where we can be helpful, is prioritizing that stuff.
And when
Yeah.
I came up with the list of things that I just discussed,
Right.
I did look at this document, and if you
Sure.
look, for instance, on just under students, on-track status, student perceptions, attendance behavior,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about security,
Yeah.
actually, at that point.
Sure.
Safety incidences there, too. I didn't mention employees, but one of the things I had discussed
Section
with
employees,
Danny
yeah.
was, one of the things we talk a lot about are the paraprofessional turnover.
Sure.
It would be nice to measure that. And one of the things I'd asked Danny about was, if we want to set up our own measurements, but there is no, he thinks that we can probably, I don't want to speak for you, but we talked about, there might be some data out there, that isn't necessarily just readily available, but if we want to make up our own measurements,
Sure.
make up our own ways
Metric.
of measuring, could we look at the paraprofessionals? Because that is affecting all the other stuff that we're looking at. So, yeah, I was looking at the strategic document
Sure.
of the performance areas, and I think a lot of the things that we've discussed have been in the strategic plan discussions.
Yep.
And so I think we're thinking about the right things, we're trying to allocate the right things, now we need to measure the right things. And I think a lot of the things that we've discussed warrant assessment. And I think this is a really nice time to put those in place, you know, so that we can really be clear about if it's working, and if not, we need to change it. So, yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and I forgot about this document tonight, but I did.
Yeah, I'm
review
just
it.
trying to,
Yeah.
instead of us cherry picking, which might strike us right now in the moment, it's like everything we should be doing should be driven off that plan. If not, then we have the wrong plan. And you know what's interesting as I'm looking at the document? Like on that one pager, it lists employees and a whole bunch of stuff, but as I scroll down, I don't see any employee items addressed in there, because I would agree with you, retention, exit interviews, particularly our parapros, you know, just to find out, maybe we find out after the 10th parapro leaves, it really is money, you know, and now we have data to back up what we thought might be the case. So I don't know where employees tie in, although it's mentioned on the KPI page. I don't see it in the other sections, but I don't know why I didn't catch that sooner. But I agree, though, all the stuff is good data. So from here, though, I mean, I guess we could, to try to give us some direction, is there, you know, and I'm not sure everyone's familiarity, we'd have to like review that, like I even had to bring it up, like it's just not 100% ingrained yet. I don't know if I could tell you which one of those don't tick one of the boxes on that plan to dump it. Maybe that's homework to go back and do. Maybe these items attach back to the plan in a column, or under the 20% comment, or whatever you're using as your guiding document. I know we've had various of it.
Yeah, generally, I think most of these are going to be on that single page, and we identify as part of the strategic planning process.
Definitely all on there,
Yeah.
but not specifically, are they? On the one pager?
Some of them might not be,
Okay.
but I think.
I don't know, if there's not one I can't see that is.
Can we talk a little bit maybe then about, can I ask a little bit about if the board has ideas around a cadence for reporting? Maybe that was more where some of the conversation was
Yeah,
in that board
it
retreat.
may have been. How often should we see it? I think it's a balance of, we want to know so we can change course or give direction to change course, but we can't kill the administration and our teacher leaders and teachers with the need for us to have it either. So somewhere in there is the right answer. I know you had a document in here with suggested timetable. My assumption is that matches up when you're receiving the data, or no?
It matches up with when we're receiving data and when we would have committee of the whole meetings. That's what I was trying to
Oh,
do,
I
is
see.
pair those together. And then there's kind of an annual when the state report card comes out in the fall.
Well, that brings up a question that I asked 15 minutes ago. There are going to be different times when you're going to have different data.
Yeah.
It's on this page.
Right, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
that would determine in and of itself when you can report it, right?
Yes.
No, like failure rates, we definitely would want to get a quick cadence on that, just to catch data and whatever. I think,
September cow is where it's at.
Is there like a
right now.
warning? Somebody said something about early.
Intervention.
If some interim
Intervention?
intervention, I mean, if somebody's failing a course, there's a warning before they fail it so we can jump in? Or does they have to fail it first and then something happens?
Freshman on track.
well, you're getting that report the next year.
And failure rates, is that just how many kids received enough in a semester, or are you think
We could do mid.
do you define it as something else?
We could do in the middle of the term. We could be giving you reports on how many students
So
today
if
have.
somebody's getting midterm F, that's a signal to jump in and,
Correct. Yeah, we do have some internal flags for that, as well as we send reports home to parents now on a monthly basis if their student has Fs in the class.
this is an F in Latin talking to you, and it scarred me for life.
That's okay. So we do have some internal flags for that we tried to address.
Well, then maybe this chart, your example reporting calendar, is, maybe it's on target. I guess the only thing I would mention, it's a lot of information, and to commit to this much, maybe we want this information, but I would wonder how easy it is is it just quick export, it's ready for us? Or is it like, no, it's gonna spend 2 days getting it ready? Or again, do one of these not directly connect to one of our strat plan, and maybe it just shows up in a board report?
Gotta pull the data. The first time you run it, it would be time consuming.
It might.
The second time you run it, it should just fall out and accumulate, and
Yeah.
it should be ready to go.
Well, it depends on
Like,
which, it depends on the data that's, we can retrieve systematically versus someone
Right.
manually doing it.
Right, well, Power School has the data that you need, and the new program says you can dig it out in a more friendly fashion. I don't remember what that program was,
And
but,
it auto-delivers from Power School into the new program.
yeah, well, I think, because to me, you know, the end result of all this is to improve the achievement gap, and to help all students, but to pull the students up who are underperforming, whoever they may be. And I think that's the measurement you need to see more than once a year. It's harder to get, but the data is in the system all the time. So you could know, you know, say 4 times a year, at mid-semester, semester, mid-semester, end of the year.
Are you talking about seeing how students are doing?
Classes.
No. Give me a second to say it. How students are doing in terms of different groups, disaggregated information about achievement? Yes. Okay. Can we pause here for a minute? I want to draw your attention to one of the attachments in the thing here, the equity-focused metrics. Because this is a tool that came from the equity training thing that I went to, where a major emphasis was to be aware of when we're looking at outcome data, like freshmen on track or graduation rates, and when we're looking at data about the systems that produce the outcomes, which we all talk about all the time. But so on this little chart, they've got columns here. Access, representation, and meaningful participation are 3 areas that they're talking about as process systems that we have. Do students have access to what's going on? Are they represented in the system? And can they meaningfully participate? And that those kinds of data produce the outcomes. So I feel I want to be mindful, if we're going to look more frequently at achievement data, that we're alongside it looking at some data about what we're doing that produces those outcomes, so that that informs the way that we think about.
And I was thinking about that as well. I think initially we do have data on our freshmen on track, right? That's showing certain groups are certain ways and either decreasing or increasing in positivity or negativity. However, we already know some of the information. I think initially, though, if we can collect real-time, I'll say real-time data, then we start teasing out afterwards, like, okay, well, how many are participating in X program? How many participate in Y program? Like, I totally agree with what you're saying. I think initially, we might have to get raw, undelineated data, but then I think that's when we start looking, okay, we focus on certain groups to figure out what is different and what is not working. I'm mindful. I'm telling you, I just want you to know that I totally understand what you're saying.
One of the
agree.
things I'm thinking about is that behavior is all over the place on
Yes.
our thing, but nothing about in what ways are we addressing behavior concerns? And we get a report about suspensions, but there are a zillion things that happen before somebody gets suspended most of the time. And we have no visibility to what's going on before suspension. Is there some kind of information that's readily available that would give us a picture of what's happening before, on a lower level related to
Well, the
addressing,
same
maybe
with-
even just participation in restorative conversations, since that's our.
And I think the same line would be, the discussion would be for those in behavioral special ed, right? Like, we've seen the numbers and we know what they look like. It's almost a similar conversation, where we have certain groups that are overrepresented and yet underrepresented as a total population. So if we want to move backwards in both of those and say, maybe we don't have the answer to that, but maybe we could all think of, and Danny could help us find some of those measurements, because
Another way to
you're
hand-
right, like 10 steps before is what we might need to measure, but we don't know what that is sometimes.
The other way to handle it is, we have our information, and that chart you gave would be great KPIs for the DEI section in the strat plan as well, which could get onto this list, because right now, I don't think it's on there, but maybe there was more of a focus of, you know, student-specific kind of academic stuff here, but probably wasn't everything. But maybe, and I hate to say more work, because I know on the admin side, this is gonna be tons of work to provide us this, but it's not just data, but data with context. And part of that is helping us understand what happens before some of this, and it could be verbal, it could be a narrative, it could be, and part of it is just, I don't know, because we can take data and read into it what we want, but if you can help us
Yeah.
couch it with an understanding, and again, maybe it's just not, we don't need another report, but maybe it's just walking us through verbally, you know, we got some data. We also want you to know before it got to the 10 suspensions, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to tie it in logically where it's
I don't
already
see our
residing.
initial, I don't think our initial request for data is gonna be the endpoint of our
No.
measurements, like
But
that's
where
gonna
does
be
the
in
discussion happen then?
Beginning. Or not even a discussion, but okay, now we've identified this, now we might need to collect data on the process before this, right? But we need to have that discussion,
Yeah,
as you're talking about, to see what needs to be measured from there. I don't see this as a, 10 years from now, we're measuring the same, like just a failure rate, right? Like, we're gonna go to failure rate, and then we're gonna see what subsections are popping out that we need to address, and what do we need to measure beyond that to see what's working and not working.
I'm sitting here
I agree.
trying to wrap my head around this, and it just occurs, it seems to me, I mean, data can tell you anything, but there's different kinds of data and different timing and different degrees of what we can do about it. I mean, I'm interested in hearing from Danny, this particular thing is trending, and here's what I suggest we do now. You're gonna get another kind of data that John referred to, it's gonna happen every year, and there's not much you can do about it. Some of these things, it seems to me, we can do something about. That's what I wanna hear about. Now, annually, if something happens and we need to respond on a programmatic basis, fine, but it seems to me those are two different things.
I have seen some strategic plans evolve into yearly action steps, which may be different year to year. Those action steps have their own KPIs attached to them. Some action steps may be 3 years long. Some are gonna be 1 year. We're gonna knock it out. We got some data. And that's almost sounds like what you're referring to, or what you're referring to is the data that we're getting may change depending on where we are in the implementation cycle too. So
Or what we need to
But
measure
to-
might change.
To put it simply, I want to be on, I want you to be on notice that if something's going to blazes, we know about it and we do something about it. That's what's most interesting to me in the short term where we can be effective. Speaking strictly for myself.
Sure.
I want to go back to something you were saying before, Beth, and John was saying you keep talking about the achievement gap, and you mentioned the word participation. It'd be interesting to know, we've got all these tools, some, places kids can go for additional help to help close this gap. It'd be nice to know how many kids are actually taking advantage of these, how many kids are participating. Because you could say, you know what, we got teachers coming at lunch, we come in early, late, doing this, but are kids actually participating in those? And or are we fooling ourselves that we've got all these great things that are going to make a difference? And two, let's say there's a high participation rate. Of those kids that are in there, how many of them really need the help to close the gap? And how many are the top kids trying to
being
become
rich.
perfect?
And that's going to my second line of measurements.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying when Susan was addressing this chart, which I totally agree with. Like, it's not about who's coming in, or what the it is about the participation rate. If there's nobody participating,
Yeah.
we're wasting our money.
Right.
But if there are people participating, but we look at their grades
Yeah,
and they're not achieving, then we know that we
They
either
are
need
achieving.
yeah, or they are achieving, whichever.
They were achieving
like-
before they came in.
And who's
Yeah.
achieving? Who's achieving?
Right.
Right? And so the data will change, in my opinion, we'll need to look at different data. It's an initial measurement, but we're not gonna measure participation rates for the next 25 years. We're gonna keep digging down deeper, in my opinion. That's what I would like to see, but.
So,
Can I bring up another metric that's not on there that I hate to add to the list, but just something to think about? We keep talking about graduation rates, and it's critical that all our kids graduate. But only X% are going to go on to a four-year university. A fair amount of them are not. So do we do any measurements in how many of our students are participating at the tech campus or something else to prepare them for life after Warren? That doesn't mean going to a four-year university? Or are we just glad that they get out of here with a high school degree? I'm not sure how we measure that, but I think that's just important. I mean, the idea is to get them used to life after high school. I don't want to focus too much on the college portion of it.
Well, the graduation rate is high school graduation, not college, correct? Is that
Right,
what
that's
we're
high
talking
school,
about?
but
I
I'm
just wanna
concerned,
make
yeah,
sure.
what
Okay.
happens when they get done? Do we just say, here's your,
Yeah, I understand. Okay,
Yeah.
I get you.
On the Illinois State Report Card, the CTE enrollment, is that Tech Campus? Or it's Tech Campus and
for
other
us,
things?
most of that is tech campus, but not all of it. Yeah.
On the flip side of that, early college success, those that do go to college. I won't get specific, but I had a whole bunch of credits before I went to college. I was like almost a sophomore before I got there. A week, 2 weeks after I got to Western Illinois University, there was somebody from Maine West, we're talking 1968, who wanted to know what I had learned in high school and why I was able to do that. Do we do that?
No. The only post-high school data we really collect is if a student enrolls in a four-year university or two-year college, community college program. We do get enrollment data back and some success data. But if they go into a trades program or something that's not specifically a two-year college or
I guess what I'm
university,
saying,
and we
you
don't
probably-
follow up. We don't follow up with students after they've
It
graduated.
seems to me we had a meeting some time ago, and I'll bet you we get, 20, 30, 40 kids that go to U of I, bunch go to Northern, bunch go to Western, Southern, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, you couldn't do it all over the country, but you could send a counselor or a representative or somebody to meet with our kids that are in a particular school, just to find out why.
Yeah, we don't do anything like that right now. Well, if I'm looking at if I could put my thought in here, if I'm looking at the example report calendar that I put out, I think Tony had previously asked like a question about how much time it would take. Probably the high level metrics that are on here, like failure rates, attendance, behavior, aren't going to be difficult to get. The kind of the leading indicators for that, or breaking it down, or as board members have questions immediately before that conversation or right after that conversation, those are probably going to be what it would take us a little bit more time to look at. But generally reporting on a cadence, the example that I've got in there, I don't know if that would take us a whole lot of time to pull most of that data.
Which is why, to bring us back, you were probably asking, what are the priority items you would like us to pull? Because now that we did all this, but yeah, that's all right.
I
Yeah,
think
so. It's going to be hard because I think we all feel passionately about making sure everyone moves forward, and we probably all have a slight bend on which one's most interesting. That's why I was trying to pull us back to the strat plan, and I'll give my 2 cents and leave it at this. Another way to attack this is going back to my example of maybe this just ends up being a per year basis. They come to us in July, August, and say, for this upcoming year, we're going to throw you these 7 pieces of information because we naturally have made programmatic changes. Here's what they are. Here's how we're going to measure it. This year, you'll see it 3 times this year, along with the other stuff. But like if there was, and then the next July or August, that might be a different 7. It might be 3 out of the 7 because it's continuing. But if you're trying to prioritize which ones to throw at us, I mean, the natural connection is, where are you spending your time? Where are you spending our dollars? Where are you, I think the ultimate is just making sure that we're moving forward and that accountability piece is there.
And that the dollars spent
in the right places. So if it's important enough for our administration to spend time on it, it's got to be resourced and it's got to be working too. And they should come back and say, Danny should come back and say, it's going to take me 3 years to implement this, and fine. So for the next 3 years, we'll measure. So I'm throwing that out as a suggestion.
think it should
We're
be
getting a
both.
little close to the dance floor, by the way. You know, we gotta keep us on the balcony, but
Stay on the balcony.
In a way, but we're still looking at balcony subjects. I mean,
We are.
because we have the responsibility to make sure our kids are getting an education.
You.
And looking at the effectiveness of the education and the money spent in certain
Yep.
places is.
that is
exactly
one of
what
our
we're here
jobs.
for. Yep.
That is one of our
Yep.
jobs.
So, I don't think we're out of bounds yet.
Not yet.
I like the idea of doing an annual, here's the data we want to look at next year, because I think part of my hesitancy and with past experiences has been superintendents who push a set of, a data set in front of school boards and say, these are the things you should measure, and everybody's fine with that until they're not. And so some type of annual, if I'm giving you our annual plan on a page at the same time that I'm saying, here's the data that we're going to look at, that gives you a regular opportunity to say, no, Weisman, I actually don't think these are the numbers that we should be looking at this year. That makes a lot of sense to me. And
It's
something I
a
hadn't
way
thought
to not
about before.
overload you either.
Yeah.
Are we going to be transparent at any time with the data?
Yeah, I think that what I would like to do is come back with like a report calendar and have a handful of metrics that we will give everybody on an annual basis, and then some that we're going to focus on and do more often throughout the year, and ask you to approve that report calendar for the upcoming year. And then anything that's on that report calendar is just on some type of public dashboard.
I just want to clarify what your question was. I'm sorry. What do you mean? Are we going to be transparent?
Give the information to the public.
Okay.
when we get
I mean, we'll be discussing this in board meetings, right?
Right, but
Yeah.
having it like publicly accessible.
Some organizations do something like that, but in the form of some kind of visual dashboard. It could be a gauge. It could be, we're 70% there. It could be yes or no, we've made progress. Maybe it's not all the data out there, because that would have confidential student information and all that, but
Like a visual.
are we heading toward the right direction? There's some places have done that. Do we want it? Does our community want it? How much time would it take them? I don't know. Those are all questions. But it can, and many places do.
Yeah, because the common person's not going to go into a board report and look for that. They're just not going to. So when I say transparent, it's like having it out there on the dashboard for them to see.
Making it more visible.
Making it more visible.
Yeah, when you say transparent, it's almost like, are we going to hide it or not?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what we were
Yeah.
talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
Danny, anything else? That was a
No, that's super
long but good
that's super
conversation,
helpful.
I think.
Well, we haven't
but
gotten to finances yet.
I know we haven't. I'm only speaking on behalf of Susan and I for the
That's right.
Students Committee, which I know took a while, but it's.
Yeah, we're always redheaded, yeah.
I would argue, though, I'd rather be talking about all this than kitchen equipment and
Yes.
buses, and this is the right stuff to be talking about.
I agree.
Although kitchens are very important and they serve
They
students
are.
every day.
They
and
are.
There are
I
a lot
won't
of
knock-
very dedicated people trying to make that equipment work.
No, I just
so.
meant the
Probably learn a lot of.
actual equipment.
What
We've
do you
had
think of,
discussions
so if I come back with like some type of report calendar that you could approve, and metrics reporting calendar, feedback on the idea of using committee of the whole to focus those conversations? No, yes, maybe,
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, okay,
Absolutely.
okay. What I heard was, it seems like there is board consensus that at least right now, these are the right numbers that we should be looking at. They're on our strategic plan. They're big umbrella. They're not too deep down on the dance floor, but or just a recognition that there's going to be probably discussion around some leading indicators and the importance of what's leading into these outcomes. Also, the need to make sure that when we're presenting the data, we're having some discussion around context and why are we thinking the way that we're thinking about these numbers right now? What types of things are we working on? And how are we measuring our current work? Is that an okay? Okay. That's really helpful, actually. Do you want to talk about this operation specifically as well, or is it the same?
Yeah, no, I think we should. I think it's a little different, but it's the same in a lot of ways. So I know Danny had asked us to, for metrics, right? And as far as our financials are concerned, we get reports every month that we get to peruse through. And I know that when we've had reports in the past, and then there's some new reports that are very readable and helpful. Based on those reports, we could use things that are within those reports to use as a metric to guide us as where we are financially. Are there any things that you guys would like in addition to that to look at, or are you guys just looking at the annual projected budget and things like that? Like what, I see smiles because it's just glazy at this point, I'm sure, but.
I
anyone
did have a
thoughts?
question that might just be how to read this kind of data. But in our strategic plan, it talks about having data related to budget efficiencies. What would I be looking at that would tell me about that?
Yeah, so a budget efficiency is a fancy word for saying how close are you to what you budgeted you would be
On
at.
track.
So you would look at that for revenue, how close are we to the revenue
Oh,
we
okay.
thought we'd get in, and how close are we to the expenditures we thought we'd have.
Okay, because in that really fat book with the key indicators, they talked about all kinds of efficiencies.
Yes. Most of those are, like the way that organization works is they're a data warehouse, so school districts can compare their key indicators to other school districts. And so generally within each category, like in the finance category, they probably have 2 or 3 high-level ones that school boards could look at, and then they're getting down to, what the custodian's actually looking at on a regular basis.
Thoughts about it?
Which of these are most important to us? Or
Are there any that you guys feel strongly? Yeah.
To me, the most important ones are A, long-term financial projections. We made a lot of time to make sure we have that. I don't think I need to go into detail on why. And then D and G. What are we doing about facilities and what are we doing about safety? I mean,
I would say E. I mean, we get that every month anyway. but-
yeah, that's,
Yeah.
We get most of this information.
Yeah, EAT applies to all of it, right?
Right. And can I marry in the discussion about the reports? We've been asked what type of financial reports do we want to see on a monthly basis? We get a lot of reports. Some we've gotten historically, some are relatively new. Some may be very confusing to people, some may be very straightforward to people. And are there any thoughts on what people would like to see or not see? Are there any that we do not need going forward?
So in the interest of helping, get rid of stuff that people probably don't look at, is that the treasurer's report has a lot of pages in it, right? I only look at 3 of them. And that's the 3 that are at the very end. And it's not the very end, it's number 10, page 11, and page 12.
So these the dials.
Right, and the chart with
And the chart.
Because
Okay.
those are just really broad, big pictures.
Okay.
Anything that goes down into the account level stuff is just not,
Like this one. We don't need that.
no.
no.
And on a monthly basis, it's
Well,
so
that goes
quirky.
back to our role, like we're
Right.
making
I like
sure.
that page.
Right.
Which one?
Which page?
Well, I like where they lay out the fund balance amount.
Because you work in a business office.
If we were to draw the line, like it's the administration's job to spend the money where it should be
Yes.
spent.
Yeah.
It's our job to make sure
The
Are
big
we on
numbers
top?
are good.
Correct.
Yeah,
So
I
if you
agree.
had to find a line, your line is perfect from where we stand versus where they stand.
I mean, all the data there makes up those 3 pages.
Yeah.
And so
I'm
that
not
to me-
looking at specific account
I'm not
numbers.
either. I'm looking at those 3 pages. If they look the same, I look for the relativity from month to month, and if they look if everything seems to be flowing the right way or the same way, then I look for aberrations, and then you go, oh. Because if you can see it on that chart, then you should be sending up smoke signals to someone, saying, we got a
And we
problem.
did ask for the cash flow of other objects, which is, right?
Because that was a big number
Yep.
that we kept
That
wondering
was a
what
number that we
was.
wanted to kind of, I think that was the only one we wanted to drill down on, right?
Yeah.
Because it was so big, and
Yeah.
it didn't have a definition.
Vague.
And Danny is pulling up, especially that, I think Chris has done a great job of, I like this. This helps me so much where
Yeah.
it gives me an end game of the year because of the school nature of the different months. You have cash in some months, cash out. I know. I look at that differently than I look at this, though. In my old world, that's what I would look at.
It's okay.
So,
I'm
yeah,
not saying it's wrong.
I find it very helpful.
That's good. The data's
But,
the same, but
yeah.
if that chart is good for you, then we should have it.
I agree with Beth.
I'm with
I'm
John.
sure you do.
Big picture.
And that's okay. We can have more than one version.
No, I think the revenue and expenditure
I need
reports are
colors.
really
You like it's color coded.
super helpful.
Okay.
Red, blue.
I think
Green is
we
good.
probably legally have to give you our cash investment report on a regular basis.
Okay? Take that.
That,
This is a fund balance report. I'm not sure. I'm getting the vibe that you don't necessarily want this level of detail.
Correct.
I like the fund balance.
Okay.
Natalia gets the fund balance.
Okay.
That's an old one. That's not the new one at the end.
No.
That's a different,
one.
yeah, she's not talking about that one specifically, Danny.
You,
She's talking about the newer ones that are,
the ones down here.
the ones that's a monthly one that Beth was looking at.
This
too
one.
earlier.
Okay.
No, it's longer, wider.
The big
What do you
one.
think?
oh, no, this is,
No, that's fine.
is this what you're talking about, Natalia?
Yeah, that's fine for
That's
me.
the one she wants.
This one.
That's the one Beth
I
likes.
like
That's the
that.
one Beth
But
likes.
if we're gonna pick one, you can go with that.
Okay.
That one in my 3 personal favorites.
See.
That one incorporates expenditures and revenues. There's 2 different
Yep.
ones, right?
Yep.
Just to be clear. Okay.
Right.
This is a balance sheet.
Nope.
I don't know if anybody uses this.
I look at it, I find it fascinating, to be honest with you, but I don't need it.
Okay. And then there's this cover sheet. Nope. Okay. And what I'm just trying to do is make sure that the data that you want, you're getting, and it's not mixed in with the other data, since we're talking about data. I think that gives me what I need. So Chris and I can try to prioritize what we're giving you every month.
So moving one step away from the reports, so we look at these every month, right? And we double check our cash and our expenditures and our revenues, right? But then, are there any other measurements you guys think that we might want to look at as far as KPIs are involved going forward? So some of the things I had just thought about, just for discussion, were maybe just double checking contract numbers. We have a new house environmental
Maintenance.
maintenance group.
Sorry, not maintenance, custodial.
One of the things in that long list of KPIs or whatever, a couple of things were the custodial measurements of dollars per student, stuff like that. That's not something we internally would be able to really see, but if we had some data to compare it, maybe we could kind of take a look at our contracts and see, are they working for us? How do they compare
Don't we have to
outside of our
authorize
building?
Each contract anyway, right?
Pardon me?
Don't we have to authorize each contract anyway when it comes through, do we not?
We do.
We can review it before the end of the contract, too.
Sure. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying, like,
Right.
are we in line with what we should be spending on some of these contracts? Like per student, or some of the measurements I think were like per student or stuff like that.
Square foot.
I don't know, it was just kind of something I was like, well, maybe that would be interesting to know. Are we way underspending? Are we overspending? it doesn't mean we have to change anything. I'm just saying it might be something that we should look at, just to see if we're in line with national or state. I don't know how they report data.
Yeah, though that's it's like a self-selected cohort group.
I'm
What
on
is
the
the
fence on that.
national?
I'd like to know that information too, but is that getting too granular for what we need to get involved in?
We're spending a lot of money on it. I don't know.
We also have great administration that should be keeping track of that, and they should let us know if they feel like we're veering off track on those.
It seems to me, when we're discussing renewing a contract, we're gonna talk about that.
It's contract renewal, yeah. I mean, like food
Well, that's
service,
different.
we
Contract
talk
renewal is
about.
one thing. We're talking about
Well, that would be
mid-contract.
Yeah, but in order, you're talking.
To measure it.
Mid-contract,
Yeah.
okay.
to measure it for the contract
Yeah.
renewals.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, like, when I used to do contract food service, I mean, you're looking all month to see, or all year to see if your contract is sturdy, or if you're getting the dollars, the gains for the dollars you're spending, right? So, I don't know. It's up to you guys. That's just a thought.
With what Paul says, could we rely on staff to turn around and give us warning if the contract's getting, we're spending way too much on saltines? Somebody's gonna let us know mid-contract? If we could ask them to keep their eyes open if.
It's not about saltines. I think, so the
I
measurements
just
were
made up,
like.
come on, I made up something.
No, no, what I mean is, the measurements were like, if we spend let's say $100,000 a month on a certain contract, and we have 100,000 students, we're paying $1 per student. They're measuring how much we're paying in a contract, if I'm not mistaken, how much we're paying in a contract versus other entities. Are we paying twice as much for our number of our students than other entities are paying for their number of students?
I wanna know that when it's time to renew the contract, but if you wanna know it
It might be,
mid-contract, okay.
okay, we'd have to pull that right away together, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to do it, we don't have to do it monthly. We could do it annually or whatever. So, just a thought. Contracts are like food service. It's a whole nother ballgame. That's a fee-based contract, I think, so it's something we should probably look at. There's a lot of money spent on those.
Yeah, that's true. I think we could definitely try to just figure out how those KPIs are being pulled in that report. Because they are big numbers. They're like cost per square foot
Right.
or some type of cost per child on the food service. And we could definitely pull those as we're
Easy
looking
number
at
to,
contracts this year. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Plus, yeah, and then like some of the things were like dollars per student on
Copy
transportation.
releases.
You know, dollars per student, that would be easy to measure. It'd be interesting just to see what we pay as a district per student versus other districts, I think.
Yep.
To see what our efficiencies are, or lack of efficiencies, who knows? You know, we don't know unless we look.
Got that down.
Anything else, you guys? Is there anything else that we needed to cover? Let's see. Danny, is there anything you were thinking of that we didn't cover?
I don't think so. This is really helpful for me just to talk through the data indicators and some time that we spent on just the ideas of reporting calendar. So I appreciate the time. Not the most energetic topic that everybody's always excited to talk about, but important. I appreciate the time spent on that today. So I don't think I have anything else.
Done with the committee of the whole then? Move to adjourn the committee of the whole and reconvene the regular meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz and second by Anderson. Mr. Demonte is, well, not present.
Yes.
Mrs. Squires?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mrs. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
I have 6 yes and 1 not present. Motion carries.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Roll call.
Motion by Schultz, second by Carlson. Mrs. Martinez?
Yes.
Mrs. Pope?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mrs. Squires?
Yes.
Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
And Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Demonte is not present. 6 yes, motion carries.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Now, we all need to
Good,
get out of here
everybody.
before 20.